time. Yes, it's deconverted man time. I didn't screen my name. Oh my word. Anyways, let's do this video. Check it out.
I think everyone would like to consider themselves rational, and in most cases, everyone is.
No, I don't know that that's the case, but okay, yeah.
We operate using rationality and logic in much of our everyday lives.
I don't know about that.
Rationality allows us to interact with other people, eat food instead of poison, and just understand the world around us.
I don't know that rationality helps us with food versus poison per se. I mean, we kind of have specialized ourselves to the point where I would dare say the average American wouldn't know a poisonous mushroom from a non-poisonous mushroom, for example. And as far as other foods, like you have to guess, really. I mean, like, you're kind of like up for grabs of what's poisonous or not in the wild, right? So, yeah. But anyways, okay, yeah. Come on, play.
We exhibit rationality every day. But when it comes to what we believe, many people are quick to call into question rationality. It's common for people on both sides of the debate about the existence of God to accuse their opponents of being irrational.
I don't care if you personally are rational or irrational because you, the person, is irrelevant. What matters is the argument itself, whether or not the argument is valid and sound or not. If not, then that argument should be set to the side, discarded, if you will. You should hold its conclusions in judgment and be skeptical of them until somebody fixes that argument. That's all that really matters.
Frankly, I think today things are better than they've been. I was around in the early days of YouTube, and the debates that took place were pretty rough. This was the era of the new atheists and groups like Rational Response Squad. This was when you were most likely to hear an atheist tout their supreme rationality over all the theists.
I don't know. I didn't see any of that when I was a Christian back in the day when YouTube was still fresh, hot off the presses before Google bought it. But yeah, anyways, whatever. I don't know.
The atheists have had their heyday, but let's be honest, Christians have been saying the same thing for a very long time, perhaps even longer. There are many Christians who believe that atheism is irrational and that atheists are simply lying to themselves when they say they don't believe in God. I am happy that today, much more of the discussion regarding the existence of God is tactful and free of ad hominems. But I also think that the debate has become more philosophically rich and nuanced as well. That being said, while the big names surrounding these debates have become a touch less insufferable, the old ways still survive. So I wanted to take some time to talk about rationality. And really, if I succeed, I'd like to take it out of our vocabulary when we discuss these metaphysical beliefs.
I mean, I don't know that you could do that or anyone could do that because people are going to use whatever words they feel like. But in regards to the question itself, it sets up what I think is a false dichotomy. Are they or is this group or this group more rational? Well, what do you mean by rational? That's pretty important to know. It is rational, given human nature, that somebody told from, start to finish, so to speak, when they're growing up, that X is true, whatever that is, that they're going to probably believe that, especially if everybody around them is, saying that X is true. All the adults around them, all the kids their age, everyone is agreeing and they're noticing that they spend time and energy talking about X, they do activities surrounding X. It's made a big deal. something very important, something that's always around them, then yes, given human nature, it is completely rational that a human subjected to that sort of pressure from outside would think that X is true, whatever X is. It could be a god claim, it could be a claim of magic, it could be any sort of claim. Yes, even Santa Claus. Now some kids, of course, figure out, yeah, Santa's not real, but people don't really treat Santa as real. Not really, like superficially, possibly. Um, but you know, they're not constantly talking about it. They're not constantly saying it's real and reassuring each other it's real and celebrating it and making it, seem real. And thankfully, I think a lot of the Santa being real stuff has kind of died out. I remember now maybe it's still around. I don't know for sure, but I remember they would say NORAD is tracking Santa's sleigh and things like this on the news. And I was, it's just really obnoxious. And I know a lot of Christmas movies would be like Santa's real and stuff like that, but I don't know that anyone takes it super seriously. It's not like a religion. Um, it could be though. And if it was, if enough people took it seriously and acted like it was real, then it would be rational that a young person growing up in that environment would conclude that Santa was real. That is rational within human nature. Now, rational in terms of, is it coherent? Is it something uh, that is true? No, it's not real. So you can come to a conclusion by using a set of ideas that seem very rational to you, but in fact are irrational. And that might be because you didn't learn formal and or informal logic, or you didn't learn the scientific method, or things of that nature. So but the human nature in and of itself is one that we are guided largely by peer pressure and by the society around us to some extent. So because God is so common in society and is accepted, it isn't rejected as a silly, stupid belief. Uh, People don't see a problem with it. Now, on the flip side of that, there are beliefs that are not widely held, like beliefs in crystals and that they have mystical powers. But some people believe in that. And so, if you're the sort of person that kind of thinks, well, maybe there's something to it, and somebody's talking about it excitedly as if it is real, then you might be convinced that it is real, especially if you're told it's not real by other people. You might actually, as backwards as that seems, you might actually think that it is real because, well, they're hiding something and they just don't know the truth that you found, or something like this. It's very interesting, human psychology at work. So there you go. That's how to avoid it. Neither one is more rational than the other. Case closed. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody. Oh, okay.
First, no matter the sincerely held beliefs on metaphysical questions such as God, souls, and the afterlife, there will be those who arrive at those beliefs rationally and those who don't. We all know Christians who have just always believed, and they see no reason to question their beliefs. We also all know the atheists who have read the first two chapters of the God delusion and are sure all their beliefs are founded on unassailable first principles.
I don't know any atheist that's read that book. I haven't read it. I mean, you know, I don't know anyone that's, I don't know. Has anyone read it? Let me know if you've read it in the comments. I don't know of anyone that's read it. But no, all the atheists that I am aware of that I know, uh, I would dare say that many of them read the Bible, and after the first couple sentences realized that that couldn't possibly be the word of God. That would be a far more fair analogy to make.
On the other side of the coin, there are incredibly intelligent, well read, and honest thinkers who land on both sides of this debate. I'll happily admit that there are many people smarter than me who don't believe in God, and I have no reason to question their rationality. It's certainly fair to say that a particular individual arrived at their metaphysical beliefs irrationally. But I think it's wrong to say that either belief or disbelief in God is, at its core, irrational.
Yeah, and it's weird because I have to kind of agree only because natural language is a thing and the word rational can mean a number of different things. Like I said, if you look at it from just the human nature point of view, then yeah, it makes sense that people would gravitate towards beliefs for different psychological reasons, especially when those beliefs are held by other people in that society. So it might be that they have the sort of personality type that is geared towards beliefs that are not widely held. It's like that's satanic music. Oh, okay. Now I want to listen to it more because it's the wrong thing to do, and it makes me feel special when I listen to it because I like the way it feels to listen to it. And now I'm being told it's the wrong thing. So now anything wrong must be right because it makes me feel good. So I'm going to be like this rebel sort of personality. Whereas somebody else told that, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to stop listening. I don't want anything to do with that. So it just depends upon your personality type and your environment, a lot of factors. So, you know, um, but yeah, I mean, if you mean rational in the sense of logical, like is it logical, purely logical, to believe in X? Well, okay, well, depends what X is, and this, of course, skirts around the whole question of whether or not X is really real at all, which is more important to me than whether or not it's reasonable, rational, logical, etc., to believe in any given proposition. It's like, well, it doesn't matter how much it's rational or logical, to think that something is true. If it's still false, then none of that really matters because we're very clever creatures. We could potentially, possibly construct something that is some sort of mental gymnastics that seems reasonable to everybody, but in fact, isn't at its core. Something has to be there has to be a bug in the system because it reveals to us something that's not true about the universe. And who knows what that would be, but I think that's possible. So the question of God, what is God? Well, we would have to start there, wouldn't we? But even before we went there, I think a more important question, it would be one of epistemology. How do you know that what you claim to know in the first place? How do we go about deciding what's true or what isn't true? And that's a far more important question. So, and then to answer that question, or can I get an insight into that answer to that question, look at this guy's comments here. So this guy posted a comment. Let me make it bigger, and it's gonna screw things up when I did it. Yeah, of course. Love that does that. It's just so great. All right, so there's this penguin with a gun, saying, uh, and it's just a let me get rid of this. I'm just a random stupid stranger who stumbled upon your channel, enjoyed your video, blah blah blah. Anyway, it says stuff. All right. Yeah, yeah. He, oh, wait, is that the one? No, no, sorry. That's not the comment I wanted to read. Never mind this comment. Ignore that I talked about that. Okay, let's talk about this comment. This is the comment I wanted to talk about. It's a flying plane. Yeah. All I know is I've never found any good, testable, verifiable evidence for any god or anything supernatural. So until said evidence presents itself, I remain an atheist. So this is, as I said, the insight to the post to the maker of this video, a little bit of insight into his ideas, right? Not that we can know his mind or anything like that, but it's a little bit of insight. He says, I think the question I have is what constitutes evidence for the divine? Well, Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. What's your epistemology? How would you decide if something was or wasn't divine? But that's a question that you should be answering yourself, not asking the atheist. Like, he doesn't believe that there is a divine in the first place. Then he asks this other question. He says, if God is a non-physical being, how could physical tests slash evidence ever exist of the sort you're requiring for belief? So it asks this question: if X is not physical, then there wouldn't be any physical then well, there wouldn't be any physical tests, there wouldn't be any what I would call empirical evidence. So if it isn't those things, then why should I believe in it? Is the question. Perhaps the only belief I have about it is that it exists in the mind as an idea. It's made up. It's fantasy. It's Jar Jar Binks. It's not really real. Okay? So if X is a this is Z, then you can't have the sort of evidence that you're asking for. Okay, great. Then he's going to remain an atheist because that's what he's looking for. I have my video why you can't deconvert or sorry, why you can't convert me video where I say this that you don't no religion has this. No religion has testable verifiable evidence for their god or anything else supernatural. Pretty much I say the same thing in my video. That's the problem. Your solution is to like, well, but what if it is that sort of thing? Then how in the world do you know about it? So the question is, what evidence do you have at all? Because you don't have evidence. You don't have tests or evidence because the only sort of tests or evidence that there are indeed physical. There isn't any non physical test. There is no non physical evidence. That's not like a thing that things are. Anything that's in that category is an object of the mind. It is a fantasy. It is a fiction. It is something you made up in your head. That's where it exists. And I'll show you how this is actually true. What I just said, that he would have to agree with me. I think if I talked to this guy, I think he would have to agree with me on that assertion that I just made because okay, so Plain says, if it's undetectable, then it doesn't exist. He says there's lots of non-physical things that we can have a conception of. Okay, a conception of something doesn't mean that that thing is an actual thing. It means that we think it's a thing. Doesn't mean that it's an actual thing. Thoughts. Okay, we can conceive of thoughts, but thoughts are a thing that actually we can demonstrate to exist. There's it's very it's well, not very easy, but it is something you can do. You can demonstrate that somebody is thinking with various different machinery. Feelings, we can demonstrate feelings as well. There's multiple different ways to demonstrate feelings, both chemically and uh, uh, neurologically. You can show what's happening in somebody's brain when they're thinking and or feeling something, and we could map that out and look at other brains and say, look, we're going to show you stuff that makes people generally happy, or we're going to tickle you, and we'll see what parts of the brain light up. And we'll take a whole bunch of people, we'll do that over and over again. We'll compare everybody, and look, this part of the brain lights up like every time that somebody gets tickled. Probably means that something's going on in that part of the brain that's saying you are being tickled. So we can test thoughts, we can test feelings, we can demonstrate both of these things. Ideas also can be tested and verified and shown to be a thing or not a thing, because again, this is a word that means something. Even narrative, historical or fictional, Well, that's not a non-physical thing. That is a narrative is spoken or written, and that's both tied to the physical world. So that's not physical. Plus, anecdotally, you and I both have a concept of God, right? And that concept is one that your God is a fictional character. It is not a real thing. That's the category of not physical equals not real. That's the problem. So the moment you make your God not physical, you've already made your God not real. And you might say, but there are these non-physical things. None of these things that you brought up are not physical in nature. They're all bound to the physical in one way or the other. You cannot demonstrate a non-physical thing. That's the problem. And I'm not even a physicalist. I don't know that there's only the physical, and I wouldn't claim that. But I will claim that you can't demonstrate the non physical because if it is a thing, then you can't show it because that would mean it is showable, which would make it physical. Anyways, and there was some other stuff he responded to, and I don't know, But anyway, so there you go. That's what I think. This guy, he would have to agree then that whatever the god or the supernatural is, um, you can go read it. um, whatever that is, in his concept of God, in this guy's concept of God, that God is the sort of thing that you don't have evidence for. Why in the world would you believe something like that? Isn't that just magic? I mean, you don't have evidence for magic, and I could just claim that magic hasn't got evidence. There's no test for magic because it's just not that sort of thing. It just doesn't have a test for it. Magic's not a physical thing, it's a non physical thing. But why would you believe in magic?
So, if both sides can be rational, why do honest, intelligent people come up with opposing answers to the God question? First,
And there's a lot of psychological reasons for this, and it's all psychological. It is all about how the brain works, or if you prefer, doesn't work. And it's working or not working, however you decide to view it, pretty much as we'd expect it to, given biological evolution. Uh, we are pattern seeking creatures, and deep in the plains of Africa, where we all came from, if you heard a sound, you would assume that it's a animal or a person because those are typically the things that make sounds. Now, it might just be the wind, but it is safer to assume that it's a creature or person and run or attack it than it is to assume that it's the wind. So we are agents of assumption towards agency. We assume a thing, a person did it. If my door opens, then I assume that a person did it because people tend to open doors. And if not a person, well, then it's an animal. Now, the other conclusion I would then have to have is if I discover no person or animal is, well, then it must be something natural. It must be the wind that opened it. I should not draw the conclusion that a ghost opened it because I have no example of a ghost, let alone knowing that a ghost could indeed open doors or bothers to open doors. So, anyways, but yeah, that it's all about psychology. The reason why some people believe in God and some do not is because some of us are more geared towards the wiring of uh, perception of agency, and others of us, a lesser number, are not geared that way. Now, I was at some point geared towards perception of agency until I learned logic. Once I learned logic, I saw the flaws in the arguments. Once I saw the flaws in the arguments. I was able to see that there wasn't evidence for any of my beliefs. And upon seeing that, well, what other choice did I have but to not believe that it was true? Why would I think something is true when there's no evidence that it is true? So, yeah, anyways, okay.
I think it's worth looking at ourselves and seeing if we're really as rational as we think we are. We're not computers. There are elements of our lives and our thoughts that operate outside of logic. Think about bodily appetites or emotions. Plato is famous for this in his discussions in the Republic.
Fuck Plato. Aristotle's better. But yeah, no, those things are to some extent you could formulate a logic for why you prefer whatever food or whatever thing. There could be all sorts of science done upon that sort of stuff. Uh, but yeah, people don't act rationally always. That is the case. There are, yes, people do things that are based on emotions rather than on sound reasoning. That can happen.
He tells the story of a guy who is walking down the road and sees a dead body. Part of him wants to look at the body, and the other is ashamed that he wants to look at the body. Spoiler alert, the guy looks. The point is that we're full of conflicting and often difficult to pin down inclinations and desires, hopes.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this is now understood by psychology. Not all of it, granted. And I think it'd be better if psychology developed more towards a hard science than a soft science. But psychologists seem resistant to that, at least current day ones. Maybe we could work to change the way that we teach psychology to include neuroscience in it. It's an idea, you know. Why check on the software and not the hardware? Seems the two are connected to me. But at any rate, uh, we understand a lot of these things of that why we're interested in the thing that we're also repulsed by sometimes. That this is something that's understandable within psychology. So these mysteries have kind of fallen away as time has gone on. But even if you have a mystery, that doesn't mean anything. It's just a mystery. It doesn't mean anything deeper or hidden is behind it. And the problem, of course, with Plato is, well, he was just wrong. We're not in a bloody cave. Things are actually real.
Fears, influences, etc. We're complicated. Perhaps you've had some unpleasant experiences with Christians. Perhaps someone you look up to is a Christian. Perhaps someone told you as a child belief in God is dumb. You may not even remember it. There are so many variables that could subconsciously affect how one approaches this topic. These are all non rational influences that we all have.
Now, I think my methodology is pretty rational, but if this guy listens to this video, maybe he can let me know if my method was rational or not. So here's my methodology. I believed for a long time that Christianity, and it happens that I was Christian, was true. I thought, yeah, of course it's true. Why wouldn't it be? And then, well, all these pesky atheists kept asking me for evidence, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I know we have it. I just don't know what it is. So I was like, well, I was asking around, and somebody said to me, well, of course we have the evidence. Even if we give it to them, they won't believe it. I'm like, well, let's give it to them because they keep asking. They're like, I'm not going to do that. So I went to do it. And I looked, and I didn't find anything. I found evidence against it. And I'm like, well, that's a problem. So I went to apologetics. I'm like, oh, this is great. This will save it. These arguments, these will work. But I also was learning informal logic, and I realized all those arguments suck bane. So that's that. The end. If I don't have any empirical evidence, don't have any repeatable tests, don't have a valid and sound argument, what the bleep do I have? Nothing but faith. And faith could have saved it, maybe, but then an actual God would have had to provide me a reason to continue my faith. And like Langston Hughes, nothing happened when I called out in my hour of need to God itself to help me to maintain the faith. So at that point, there's nothing left. I already have the rational reasons to leave. Now I on top of that, I have an emotional reason as well. So there's just no reason to keep believing. Now that last part, the emotional one, you could definitely say that's not rational, and I would agree. But the first two, what about that? Anyways,
They throw our ability to be unbiased into question. Less ambiguously, we all have an answer that we want to be true. Regardless of the facts, each
hey, that reminds me of the last video I just did, doesn't it, Germania? Didn't we just do a video on atheists not wanting God to exist? Man, do these guys all copy from each other or something? What the bleep's going on? Just went over this. Let's go back. Let's just all I have to do is read. Hold on. Let's just read the comments. Okay. All right. Just read the comments from my other video. That's all I have to do to respond to this. All right. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. Oh my God. What did I do? Okay. Here we go. All right. So get down to the comments. All right. Skid Row Trash says, I'm an atheist agnostic who wants God to exist. So see, he says he wants God to exist. It'd be pretty awesome. Depends which one, of course, but I think most are pretty decent. Throw in a sweet afterlife, then it sounds pretty damn cool. Also, if gods did exist, then I wouldn't be atheist or agnostic any longer by default. So what's his problem? Yeah. Um, but there has to be some reason you're not accepting the obvious truth. Yeah. Cops aren't real for me. I'm off to rob a bank. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there you go. So there's some stuff. Okay. Um, yeah. So and I think Germania said in chat, which isn't hey, look, I can't show it because it's not chat doesn't show up like that. But he said something like, I don't want God to exist, but I'd want to
I
know
think
if it did, So it's like, yeah, I mean, well, anyway, so whatever. It's just so weird that it comes up again. All right, where
evidence that supports people do not deconvert because
are we? Where were we?
like and desires, hopes, fears.
Where the hell were we? Ah, shit.
The guy looks
Okay,
ashamed that he wants to look at the.
All right, there we go.
Spoiler alert: the guy looks. The point is that we're full of conflicting and often difficult to pin down inclinations and desires.
Therefore,
hopes,
God,
fears, influences, etc. We're complicated. Perhaps you've had some unpleasant experiences with Christians. Perhaps someone you look up to is a Christian. Perhaps someone is dumb. You may not even remember it. Affect how one approaches this topic. These are all non-rational influences that we all have. They throw our want to be true. Regardless of the facts, each of us could come up with a situation that we would like. I want God to exist.
I don't care one way or the other because I just view it like whatever I want doesn't matter. Like I want to have $1 million tax free that's legal just somehow be in my bank account. That'd be amazing. That'd be great. That'd be life changing. I want a beautiful woman to knock on my door that happens to be single and a skeptic, and she looks like somebody that that resembles some anime character that I have in mind, and we get married, or we might even get married, but we live together and and do all the stuff together, say meow, all the stuff that would get me demonetized if I talked about it or whatever. Not that I'm monetized, but you'd have sex, stuff like that, whatever. Yeah, I want a lot of stuff that's not gonna just happen like that. But I'm also rational enough to know that wanting stuff doesn't matter. So I neither want nor not want God to exist. I'm just like neutral on this. Like, well, whatever. I want to know that it exists or doesn't. And so far, nobody's given me a reason to think it does. But, who knows? One day, today is not that day. Tomorrow's not looking so good either. But uh,
I want justice for wrongdoing. I want life after death. I want the sort of affirmation that comes with the phrase, well done.
yeah,
But regardless of what I want, God either exists or he doesn't.
yep,
There are lots of folks who would very much not want God to exist. Perhaps they want to do something that God might not like. Perhaps the idea of hell seems scary or unfair, whatever it may be. Both sorts of desires can lead to confirmation bias, giving more weight to evidence that supports one's desired outcome. It's also worth noting that even when someone changes their view on the existence of God, it's typically not because of rational argument. This is anecdotal, but I've never met someone who was converted to Christianity because of convincing proofs.
yeah, that's for sure. Uh, the conversion stories I've heard and read to any faith, not just Christianity, but to any faith, are always based on some personal, emotional type of event. If they didn't, weren't indoctrinated, obviously. If they were indoctrinated, it's just they've always been a Christian or Muslim or whatever. But in the cases of conversion to X, Y, or Z, it's some sort of emotional event, personal experience or whatever that causes them to do that. It's not, I don't know, it could be that somebody's out there that the intellectual argument convinced them, but then they just didn't, know enough about logic, but the argument seemed compelling. um I don't know that person, but yeah, they could exist. I don't know.
I would also argue that most people do not deconvert because of arguments. But let's look at both sides of this.
uh hmm I deconverted because there wasn't evidence. So yeah, I guess I didn't deconvert because of arguments. Although the arguments that atheists were giving me when I was a Christian certainly gave me reasons to question. I was like, I just wanted those poor atheists to know what God is like and feel God and have this experience of God. And it's like, I would compare it to like skydiving, even though I'd never been skydiving. Like, yes, like I want to, have you have this experience, but you don't even believe there's a plane, let alone a parachute. So it's like, I can't get you to come skydiving with me because you don't even believe in the first step of that. So but I don't want you to miss out on this wonderful experience that I've had. Only later, when I became a skeptic, did I find out that that experience can be generated artificially with the quote God helmet end quote. In fact, what's even more interesting about that is they've done things where they told people it was a God helmet and it wasn't. It was a placebo helmet. And they just told them that putting on the helmet would make them experience God. And then they thought that it did. So they did. It's like it's completely, absolutely something that we can induce in people. But some people, when putting on the actual real God helmet or the placebo one, don't have any experience at all. It's like, okay, well, that's weird. Well, no, not really, because different brains work differently. Ah. Anyways.
The non rational conversion story is easy to find. Go to any mega church or altar call and you see it in action. Loud music, emotions high, probably a smoke machine or a laser light show. Then the pastor gives a compelling sermon and invites people to come and get saved. None of that is rational argumentation. Still,
Yeah, and isn't it interesting? And it really should give you pause here, and I hope it does, 60-second guy. Um, that the other side of that doesn't do that. The skeptics, atheists, we don't. I mean, like there is an atheist church. I've never been to an atheist church, but there are ones like that. Do they do altar calls? I don't know. But it's like, come deconvert. Maybe like I'll sometimes in comments I'll be like, be an atheist, it's more fun. Or I'll be like, hey, be a skeptic, we've got cookies. And I'm like, by the way, if you're a skeptic, you should doubt that I have cookies for you. you know, but we really don't. We don't try to do that. Like, I don't know. So there isn't like this sort of like emotional appeal that we're throwing out there trying to get people to our side, quote unquote, right? Like I guess some atheists out there might be doing that. I don't know about them, but maybe somebody is. But isn't that interesting, like broadly speaking? I don't know. It's kind of weird. Makes you think, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Man, we're already 40 minutes in. God, I wanted this to be a short video.
Oh, it changes people's minds. Now, there's some question as to whether this is an effective way to evangelize, but this isn't the time for inside baseball. Okay, so that's how Christians might do it. But how about atheists? Surely they follow the argument wherever it goes.
Yeah?
Well, not usually.
What?
There are lots of ways this could go, but I think there are three routes of deconversion that tend to be the most common. The
Really?
first is more common recently. You see it in the context of deconstruction. Typically, a believer finds one or more elements of Christianity that they find distasteful, perhaps hell, or the way the Bible talks about homosexuality or women, whatever it may be. Since these distasteful elements go against the person's inner sense of what's right, they must be reconsidered. This is almost always quickly followed by a near complete rejection of the Orthodox Christian faith as a whole. Now, this process is not always terminated in atheism, but it can be, and it often is. But notice, it's not a rational process. It isn't rationality that leads to this place, it's feelings.
Well, I mean, again, we're playing with that word rational a little bit, but like, why would a book from God go against your core morality? I mean, if God's supposed to give us all morality in our hearts or whatever, because that is something that some Christians believe, right? And yet I'm like, it's perfectly fine to be homosexual. And I say, hey, well, the Bible says it's not okay. Wait a minute. These two things don't connect. I don't believe that. I don't agree with that. You know? When I was a Christian, I went to different churches. I went to a church, a Pentecostal church, and they believe, well, if you don't speak with the tongues, you're not saved. You don't have the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, well, that's not fair. I don't agree with that. And then later on, I went to a Church of Christ, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you have to be baptized, full immersion, has to be said in a certain way. You have to know that that's true, and if you don't do any of that, then you go to hell. It doesn't matter." And it's like, well, that's not fair. And then I thought, wait a minute, if Christians are right, we're only like 33% of the world. That's really unfair, you know. But that didn't stop me from believing. It was just this like, huh, that's weird. Why should that be? Why would God have an unfair system? I thought God was supposed to be fair. Ah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's emotional. I think it is somewhat intellectual. It just depends on how the person thought it through. I don't know. Anyways,
The next path of deconversion is similar, but more personal. Here, the person wants to do something that the Bible specifically prohibits get divorced, watch pornography, whatever it might be. In this case,
you just want to sin. Isn't that really what you're saying here? You just want to sin. That's why you stop believing. Come on.
God says no to what they want.
Wait a minute. Where does it say you can't watch pornography? Also, really can't divorce? Highest amount of divorces happens in Christianity. Jeez. Oh, whatever. All right.
So, God's got to go. This example harkens back to Plato as well. We all
Yeah.
have desires, some good, others harmful. It's the job of the intellect to protect us from giving action to our harmful desires.
Well, I guess God has screwed that one up.
Ultimately, sometimes our harmful desires win out, and our mind moves from a role of prohibiting action to justifying it. If I want to divorce my wife, it'll be a lot easier to do so if God isn't telling me it's wrong.
Yeah, and that's probably why Jesus was like, oh yeah, that's why Moses gave the things so you could do them under these conditions, yada yada yada. And so Christians will be like, yeah, you can divorce because of this, and this. Others say no. It just depends what version of Christianity you have, really. But as far as this being common, I don't know about that. You didn't demonstrate that that's true, so I'm a little bit skeptical that this idea is correct. I think you want it to be correct. I think it makes it easier for you to understand deconversions. Like, you just deconverted because you want to sin. I don't know.
How convenient. Suddenly, I no longer believe in God. The third route to deconversion is sort of boring. It's just prolonged disengagement. You stop reading the Bible, stop praying, stop going to church. Eventually, you forget about it. You lose your faith.
It's interesting how he didn't bring up my deconversion, like my version, where he just found that there was no evidence for any of it and stopped believing because of that. That's not even on his list. That's very interesting. In fact, that's like the number one reason that every single atheist and agnostic and skeptic that I know, although that's a limited number, has deconverted, if they deconverted at all. Johnny has always been an atheist from the start, so you know he's got a unique perspective in a way that's like he was not indoctrinated into atheism. They just didn't indoctrinate him into any belief, so he didn't believe in God. There you go. There's no reason to. Nobody told him to do it. So that doesn't apply to him, certainly. Um, but you're talking about deconversion. It's interesting to me that you left out the whole went away because there wasn't any evidence bit. I wonder if that's deliberate on your part. I don't know. So let me know. All right.
simple. The point to all these examples is just to show how uncommon it is for someone to change their theological stance through argument. Of course, it happens, I'm not denying that, but even then, there's a good chance that other factors were at work in the process as well. No one is pure rationality, and we have to stop pretending that it's possible to be so. But there's another layer to all of this. Even if we can get past our bias, what reason do we have to believe that rationality will even do us any good in the realm of metaphysics? Both theists and atheists have a problem here, but for different reasons. I've often heard Christians argue that because God is rational, he created a rational world, that we can understand the world rationally. And that may be true. But most Christians tend not to appreciate the degree to which God is above mankind. A good analogy is found in E.F. Schumacher's book, A Guide to the Perplexed. Schumacher uses the concept of complexity in life to illustrate his point. If you start with something like a rock, very basic, inanimate, it knows nothing, it perceives nothing, it doesn't move. Take a step up and you have plant life. Here,
Oh, hold on, though. I gotta disagree with you. Rock is fucking complicated. Are you kidding me? I know a geologist. He'd tell you all about the rock and how complicated that thing is. Everything is complicated if you break it down. What the bleeps it? What kind of rock? First of all, what material? What's it made out of? That's important. Where was it found? When? What? How old is it? All that's important. You know. And then you're like, okay, well, it's a certain type of mineral or whatever. It's like, all right, well, what's the mineral made out of? Well, the mineral's made out of elements. Well, what are the elements made out of? Well, those are made out of atoms. Well, you can keep going down and down and down. It's complicated as bleep. Everything is freaking complicated if you break it down. Everything. And then we get to a point, inevitably. If you go small, you hit a point, Planck's point. You can't get smaller than that right now. We don't know if they're smaller than that. So we go, that's it for now. Bigger, you can get pretty damn big. You can get big as the universe and go, well, that's not the biggest thing because the universe really isn't a thing. It's what is it? I don't know. It's just the way that we label what we know about and what's outside the universe. Well, it's empty space, or well, I don't know. It's unknown and perhaps unknowable because you could never reach the edge of the universe, no matter what. Like no matter how fast you travel, because you would never get there because it's always moving away. Even light can't get there apparently, even though light will get there and did get there. So it's like a paradox. How does any of that work? I don't know. It's beyond me. It's complicated as all bleep. Not sure what the bleep your point is about things being complicated. I guess you're saying that it's like it's not complicated. No, no, no. Everything's complicated.
There is some degree of perception. It can grow, react to stimuli, but it knows nothing in the sense that we would. Still, it interacts with, even manipulates the lower forms. It grows in dirt, perhaps moves some rocks around as the roots grow. Plants have a sense of what's below them, but not what's above them. The next step is animals. This is another jump in complexity. Here we have creatures that can think, manipulate much more, plan, have a will. Animals can understand rocks, plants, and even other animals, but they are not self aware. Finally, humans represent another jump on this scale. They are self aware. We understand ourselves, we understand animals, plants, rocks. We are the pinnacle on this earth. But you see what happens here? Each level on the scale is completely ignorant of what makes the next level special. If we continue taking steps up and get to God, whether it's one step or many steps higher, the scale of complexity gets a lot more complex. That is, there are going to be aspects of God that are incomprehensible to us. In fact, the Bible even says so. Think
Alright, now I'm kind of just tuned out because these are just empty, bald assertions you have about your idea of God, which you haven't shown me as a real thing, so I don't really care about. It's like, yeah, whatever. Whatever you think God is, that's what God is to you. Yeah, that's nice. Whatever. And I get it. The analogy is cute. It's like, oh, look, you've got these things, and then you've got the next thing, so there's going to be a next thing above us. And people do that, like, oh, aliens are above us, and then above that is some other thing, and it's like, no, no, not necessarily. We might be it. In fact, you know, that's it. You know, the molecules certainly aren't aware of what they're doing, at least not as far as we know, but some people believe that they are. Some people think that they are. It's like, oh yeah, the molecules, they know what they're doing. They have some sort of consciousness that we're not aware of. It's like, why would you believe that? I don't know, but people believe in weird stuff. You know? Some people believe you can alter reality by based on how you believe in it or what you believe about it, which is also ridiculous and silly. But just because we can, take an analogy doesn't mean that we can continually apply that analogy to reality and go, oh, well, we're above the animals, so then therefore there must be something above us. I know he didn't do that. I'm not saying he did, but I'm just saying it's kind of like he is doing that, and it's like just seems to me like that's the implication of this. And yeah, I don't buy it, so whatever. Moving on.
about Romans 11:33, which says, "Oh, the depths of the riches, both the wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are His judgments,
Blah
and His
blah
ways
blah.
past
Don't
finding
care.
out." So Christians have to admit that what we believe is not entirely rational. It's not supposed to be. It's beyond rationality. But atheists have their own issues with rationality. Simply put, there's no way for an atheist to prove that our senses and our mental functions correspond with reality in a perfect way.
Well, they don't. Nobody would. I don't know why you would try to prove that when that's not true. Um, our perception of reality is good enough. All right, it's decent enough for us to survive. That's it. Um, that's why we've devised the scientific method. In part, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we devised the scientific method, but part of it's to try to remove, just to as much as we can, the human flaws we clearly have. Okay, we can't see infrared, for example. We can't see ultraviolet. We can't see the spectrum of heat, you know. So these are things that machines can do. Now you can go, well, I don't know that the scientist is, when they look in the microscope, how do they know that what they're seeing is actually what they're seeing? Well, we don't. That's why they record it. They go, okay, this is what I think I saw. And then somebody else comes along and goes, all right, I'm going to look too. And they're going to record separately what they saw. And then some other schmuck's going to come along and they're going to look at both of those papers and go, yep, okay, you both reported the exact same thing. Or they're gonna go, one of you reported this, the other one reported that. Let me look. Let's see what's going on. And the more people that you put into that, and the more data gathering you have, and checking and rechecking and testing and retesting that you have, the better that gets, and the closer you get to knowing true reality, if we can ever really know it at all. And like, no, we're never going to be 100% certain. Oh no, because you know what? Our senses are flawed. Your eyes, they can be tricked. You can be tricked by all sorts of things with your eyes and all your senses. Yeah, yeah. But uh, that's why we have machines. That's why, and it's like, well, but you built the machine uses your imperfect things, so you don't know that the machine is imperfect. It's like, yeah. We're all freaking brains and vats and all that BS. Reality is real, okay? That's just where I go with that. Reality is real, and we can perceive it to whatever extent that we can. And the scientific method is the best thing that we've got in figuring all that out better than we do on our own. Religion cannot hold a candle to that. Not even close. So science has done things that religion can only, dream of in their wet dreams. You know, predictions and things that religion never had any idea about have come to be because of science. Jesus is sitting there, and one of the things in the Bible, don't worry about washing your hands. Like what comes out of your mouth is more important than what goes in. Yeah, Jesus. Thanks for not explaining germ theory, you idiot. You just told people not to worry about washing hands. And don't be like, oh, it's metaphorical, blah, blah, blah. Fucking that. Screw that. Jesus was a moron. This guy is supposed to be God on top of being a human? No, no. If he even said any of that, which I don't know that he did, but or even existed in the first place, which if he did, he certainly didn't do the things the Bible says that he did, because they just, invented like all of that stuff. They have like, Jesus did this. Why? To fulfill this prophecy. Ha! Oh, really? He did. Oh, that's convenient. That wasn't even a prophecy. But he did it anyways. Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, he needs to define beyond rationality. Yes, sure does. But yeah, if it's not, I don't know, man. Where am I going with this? I don't know. I'm in rant mode now. It's just, it's just this sort of thing can irritate me sometimes. It's like, yeah, you can't prove, you don't know about the senses and all this. Like, yeah, exactly. You know what that's a good argument for? Skepticism. Yeah, I know, amazing. Yeah, your eyesight can fail you. Your hearing can fail you. Your sense of smell can fail you. Your sense of touch can fail everything. Your brain can fail you. Your memories can fail you. Everything in you can fail you. Every single aspect of you, the person, as an individual, can fail. And then it's hope, and then somebody outside of you, it has to help you. That's it. That's reality. That's what we're stuck with. Why would God make it that way? Well, because God was incompetent if there was a God. Why, if God didn't make it that way, then this is just the way things are, you know? And it's like, well, that's more straightforward. It's like, this is just brute fact. Things came about in this chaotic world, and that's why we don't have accessibility to perfect eyesight, etc., that never fails us, because, well, that's just not how biological evolution works. What's weird about all that is we can actually improve every single aspect of humanity to the point where we wouldn't even necessarily call it human anymore. And people have already started experimenting with it. Both biologically and mechanically, they've added, bionics to themselves so that they can see different spectrums of colors or light or heat or whatever, or radiation, you know and you know
making it so that the DNA can replicate itself without failure. That's something that genetics is tampered into. So we could make it maybe that memory doesn't fail us, so that eyesight doesn't fail us, so that we improve to the point where we're pretty darn sure that we're seeing reality now because we've actually fixed the brokenness of the human to be better than it is. And it's like, yeah, we can do that. That's amazing. We can do all that. Why didn't God bother? Well, because God just sucks. That's why. If God made any of this, then God just made it really crappy. And we can make it better than God. So we're already better than God. It's like, then why do we need God anymore? We don't. Not that we did in the first place. It's like, well, that was the tree of knowledge. That's what it gave us. It gave us the ability to be God. Great. We're going to do a better job of it. Because God is completely silent, undetectable, untestable, unlike reality, which is testable. And yeah, our senses can fail. That's why you should be a skeptic, not a believer. Almost done.
If the mind evolved for prioritizing
It
survival,
did
then
evolve.
we know that it's really good at surviving. But there's no reason that a mind built for survival is one that understands reality comprehensively.
Yeah, you kind of need to understand reality in order to survive, you nitwit. I hate when people do this. It's just really dumb. Come on, man. You gotta be better than that. All right? Really, you gotta be better than that. Come on, man. Seriously. Ugh.
Furthermore, there's no way to understand that your senses themselves are comprehensive. There could be any number of realities at play that are beyond our senses or our tools of measurement. That doesn't nullify rationality, but it does call into question whether rationality is sufficient to understand all things that exist.
Yeah,
Plus, both
brother.
sides of this argument would agree.
So, see, that to me just cries of desperation. From my perspective, from my point of view, if you have to go to the route of questioning reality and rationality itself to justify faith, you've lost the plot, man. That's what he's doing here. That's all he's doing, in my view. Now, I could be wrong. You tell me I'm wrong if you want to. Disagree with me, please. Let me know. But I think that's what he's doing. He's like, look, you can't justify rationality because this, and this. Therefore, nobody can justify reality. Nobody can justify anything. So forget rationality. Rationality's dead. No, it's not. Screw that. Logic is a thing. Use it.
That in discussing the existence of God, we're dealing with a reality that is beyond sense experience. As
How do you know that? If it's beyond sense experience, then how could you ever know about it? It's incoherent. Stop talking about Plato. Aristotle's better. Aristotle's metaphysics still pounds Plato's ass now. Plato was wrong. He's just a dude that thought up some stuff. This is why like philosophy just turns me off to some degree. It's like, we've done way better than this by now. I don't know. Whatever. Just getting a little bit jaded. Maybe it's time to go to bed.
Plato would put it, we're contemplating
Plato.
higher realities.
No, you're not.
I'm not advocating that we stop using logic or rational arguments, but I want to point out that neither side has the monopoly on rationality. I
Well,
want us to begin to acknowledge the frailty of rationality.
um, no, I won't, because it's not. You're saying it is, but I'm not, because I recognize reality is real, and that the fact that we are flawed creatures doesn't mean that we can't conceptualize it well enough to do things that are logical or rational. But you have to take that apart in order to justify faith, because that's irrational if we're going to go that route, which you've gone. So I can play that game all day long. Okay, then you are irrational. The moment that you question rationality, you stop being rational by default. That's just how that would work. Ugh. I did like this guy at the start. Now he's just irritating me. Not that that matters. Not that it matters, because again, his argument either stands or fails on its own merits. It's starting to fail right now, but not well. He didn't really have an argument to, per se, but
And that, as far as the God question goes, it's much more multifaceted than we want to make it. The debate
how so? Seems pretty straightforward to me. Either there is a thing that's God, or there isn't a thing that's God. And I guess you could stretch it out to be like, okay, look, is there a thing that is a real thing, unlike a character that is fictional, i.e., Jar Jar Binks, that we would call God? What makes a thing God? Why does those things make that thing God? So if you have X, Y, and Z attribute, you are God. Why? Why are those the attributes required to be God? Well, because we're deciding, before we discover God, we're deciding that if anything has X, Y, and Z attribute, we're going to call that thing God. Okay, fine, fine. That's how we're going to go about it. Q from Star Trek is God, essentially. Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. As far as, of course, Picard, well, screw Picard, they made him mortal. Doesn't make any sense, but whatever. Or maybe Q, in my head canon, Q was playing another trick on Picard and just was pretending to die just to mess with Picard some more. Anyways, whatever. It's off track, off track, off track. Get up and
is an important one, but it's also one that should be considered from many perspectives, both
Now, the only perspective about this question or any other question is it real or not? That's it. Real like in the way that you and I are real, not real like, again, Jar Jar Binks. Is Jar Jar Binks real? No. You could still see Jar Jar Binks. We could talk about Jar Jar Binks. We can analyze Jar Jar Binks. We can draw it, we can color it, whatever, right? You can love or hate Jar Jar Binks. I hate it personally, but whatever. But it's not real, not in any sense that matters. Like, it's in a movie, it's fiction, it's in the mind. Is it useful? It could be, sure. Is it something to talk about? Absolutely. Is it something to debate? Could be. You could debate whether or not Jar Jar Binks exists. Would you be rational to believe in Jar Jar Binks, though? Huh. Yeah. That's the question to ask. So either there is a Jar Jar Binks that actually exists for real, or there isn't. If there isn't, then is it sensible? Is it something logical, rational to think that it is real when it isn't real? No, would be the answer. But if you're using rationality in terms of, is it rational if a whole bunch of people acted as if Jar Jar Binks was real, started saying that Jar Jar Binks was real, spent a lot of time and energy insisting that Jar Jar Binks was real, wrote a book about Jar Jar Binks being real. If enough people did that, then from a human perspective of how social peer pressure works and how we're social creatures, for somebody being in that environment, it would be kind of rational for them to believe that in that sense of rationality. But in the sense of rationality as far as logic is concerned, no, it would not be rational because it's not really real. And somebody could say, well, but see, Jar Jar Binks, the reason why you don't see any empirical evidence outside of the films is that Jar Jar Binks is not the sort of entity that has empirical evidence outside of the films. See, well, at least we can see Jar Jar Binks. We can't even see God. Anyways, all right, back to the thing. All right.
subjective and objective. We can gain insight not only from empirical arguments, but from looking inward at ourselves, looking at the art we create, looking at the way humans interact with each other, and hopefully we'll do that going forward. I think the way that we talk about God these days is very stale and reductionistic. And no matter which side you land on, I think that it's time to start doing it a little differently. And that's what I hope to do here on this channel coming up. So follow for more.
I mean, like, I don't really care how you talk about God any more than I would how you talk about Jar Jar Binks. The all that I care about is, do you have a valid and sound argument? That's it. That's all. If you don't have that, then what would you have? Well, empirical evidence, a repeatable test, which you already have kind of said that you don't have for God. You've already kind of hinted that you don't have that. So we know that's off the table because you think God's not one of the sort of things that has that, whatever that bleep that means. So it's God's a concept that's in the mind. Okay, great. That's it. That's where God exists, in the mind and nowhere else, until you can demonstrate it. Oh, but there's no way to demonstrate it. Well, then it's not that. Is it? Why would you think it's anything other than that? Well, you'd have to have a rational argument, which would be a valid and sound argument. How would you have a valid and sound argument for something that isn't valid or sound? Kind of a problem. Well, I don't know. We'll see if 60 Seconds Philosophy responds to this video. Probably complain that it's an hour long. Be like, why'd you talk so much, Deconverted Man? I don't know. Might not even respond at all. Probably won't. Most apologists don't. Don't know if he's an apologist. I mean, whatever he wants to call himself, you know. But anyways, what matters to me isn't how you talk about it. It's, you know, like I said, the argument. Give me a valid and sound argument or get out. And when I expose the logical fallacies, which I will, then admit that they're fallacious and stop using that argument and fix the dang argument. Or pretend that they aren't there, like many apologists have done, and keep using the same arguments. If you mean that you want to stop doing that, great, man. I might like you as a person then. It'll be like, you're my bestest friend now. Not that that should matter. Like, whether or not, you know, I like you shouldn't matter. Because, you know, like I said, what matters is the argument, not the personal stuff. So, you know. But I'm just saying, like I will like you and stuff if you actually, you know, use logic. That'd be nice. So, I'll subscribe just to see what you do. You know, hey, you've already got a bunch of subscribers. Now I don't like them again. All right, that's all I got. Until next time, stay skeptical. Or don't. Whatever, you know. I don't know. Yeah, lobsters. Yeah,